so that when you do the natural dye process, as much dye absorbs into the fiber as possible. So you get deeper, more vibrant colors. Scouring is a fancy term referring to preparing fabric, fiber, or yarn to take on as much natural dye as possible so that you can achieve beautiful, vibrant colors in your natural dye processes. In this video, I'll be sharing how to prepare your cotton and linen or plant fibers so that you can do your natural dyeing. Hey Sugar Snaps, welcome to the Textile Indie channel. My name's Brittany. I'm a basket weaver, natural dyer, and textile artist. Here on YouTube, I share tutorials and inspiration in traditional crafts like basketry, natural dyeing, wet felting, spinning, and other fiber art here on YouTube, as well as on my website, textileindie.com. Check the description below for links to that. Thanks for joining me today. Let's get started. Scouring fibers before you do any natural dyeing is a key step. As much dye absorbs into the fiber as possible, so you get deeper, more vibrant colors. Of course, this is dependent on the different dyes and the type of dye material you're using, but you will get better results if you do the scouring. I'm going to walk you through the tools and materials you need to do scouring on plant fibers. Check out the description below for more details and for the corresponding blog post on my website. The tools you will need to do your scouring are a large pot, something large enough to hold the material you are going to be scouring, whether that is fiber, fabric, or yarn. You'll need soda ash, and I also have a sheet of detergent. This is just laundry detergent, and it comes in a sheet, so I'll dissolve this in water before we add it to the pot. You'll want a digital scale to weigh out your materials, a thermometer. I like having a long one because it fits deeply into my pot. I also have a recycled glass jar. I'm going to dissolve the soda ash and the detergent sheet in the jar before pouring it into my pot to ensure that all the particles have dissolved. Some measuring spoons to make the measurement process easy, and I highly suggest wearing gloves. And the last things you're going to need are a kettle or some way to heat water to do your dissolving. You obviously can use a microwave or just tap water if your water is hot enough to produce that effect. The textile that I'm going to be scouring, this is a queen size duvet cover that I am going to scour and later be using in an indigo dyeing project. So be sure to stick around and check back in the next few weeks to see the process of creating the indigo vat and dyeing this guy with indigo. That is the tools and the materials for this process. You're also going to want a stir spoon to stir your fabric as it is scouring. I highly suggest wearing a dust mask when you're working with powders like soda ash or natural dye powders because it does protect your lungs. The powders we're working with in natural dyes, they may be natural, but any sort of powder, even dust, if you breathe a lot of it or are exposed to it a lot, you can develop an allergy to it or a sensitivity to it. And just to avoid that, wearing a mask is really helpful. So I usually wear an N95 or just a simple dust mask, whatever I happen to have handy at the time, just to protect my lungs because I work with natural dyes and these materials quite often. And inevitably, somebody's going to call me out if I don't mention safety precautions. So that's why I'm doing this. Also, wear rubber gloves because the soda ash does dry out your hands. You'll notice later in this video, I rarely remember to put gloves on when working with soda ash or doing a scouring bath, but I try to remember because it really does dry your skin out and can cause your hands to be extra itchy. If you have sensitive skin, it's also highly important to protect yourself. What's the other thing? Gloves, a mask, apron. I mean, if you want to get really intense, you could wear like science goggles, but I never do that, so. To set up a workspace, you're going to need somewhere that is near a heat source. I'm going to be working on my kitchen stove because it works the most effectively. You can also do this on a camp stove if you wish, or a grill, or on a hot plate if that's what you have accessible to you. I also have this work table set up so that I don't have to move as far to transfer the pot to and from the stove. Before we get started, I want to go over what soda ash actually is. Soda ash is sodium carbonate, and we're going to be using it to scour our plant fibers because it changes the water bath to an alkaline or to a good pH for plant fibers. We want to use an alkaline pH or a high pH when we work with plant fibers because it maintains the high quality of the fibers. If you use plant fibers in a bath that's really acidic, it can start to break down the fibers, and to a very extreme acidity, it can actually essentially melt plant fibers down and break them down from their fibrous form. So soda ash, chemically speaking, takes grease and fatty acids on the fiber and breaks them down so that they become water-soluble salts so that it's easier to wash them away. It makes the process of cleaning your fiber and removing any oils, greases, finishes from the surface of your fiber material so that then they're able to absorb more dye when you do your natural dye projects. I'm speaking as if I am scientific and I know what I'm talking about, but I actually did the research to know this myself. So I'm not a scientific expert. I'm just sharing what I've learned in the process of doing this and in research on this topic. So the whole point of scouring fiber is so that you're removing all of the gross stuff off the surface of your fiber, whether you're using fabric, yarn, or fiber in its roving form, so that the fiber is just in its natural state with nothing coating it, so that when you apply dyes to the surface of that fiber, it can be absorbed into the core of the fiber and therefore affect the color of the fiber more permanently for longer. So there are some dyes that will wash off if they're weaker dyes or fugitive dyes, but dyes that are stronger and can withstand wash and light, then they're going to stay on or stick on more vibrantly if you've done the scouring process. We're going to use soda ash in addition to a cotton fabric detergent. This combination will help remove as much of the impurities as possible. So the process we're going to go through for scouring plant fibers is setting up a workspace, weighing out the fiber so we can get the weight of fiber, calculating and weighing out our detergent and soda ash, and then creating a scouring bath, heating that with the fabric in it or fiber in it for 1 to 2 hours. Then we'll let that cool and then do a final rinse of your fibers. And then your textile will be ready to use for your dyeing projects. Now, my first step is to weigh out how much material I have so that I can calculate the scouring detergents based on that weight. So I'm going to set this to grams because that's a nice unit to work with. Tear this, and the bowl is just so that I can fit all this material onto the scale and still see what it looks like. 1,361. So we're going to use 1% of the weight of fiber with the soda ash and the same for the detergent. And I'm going to weigh that out into my jar. So again, I'll tear this guy so that it's set to 0. Don't forget to put your mask on before you use the soda ash. So we're going for 13 grams. That's about right. Forgot to mention having a stir spoon is handy for mixing your powders and also checking on your scoured textile as it heats. So I'm going to add some hot water to my soda ash here, enough to dissolve it, and I'll stir this around to get it to dissolve. Soda ash takes quite a while to fully dissolve. There's a lot of granules that don't want to totally disappear. So you can stir it for a few seconds. The hot water definitely helps. And then set it aside and let that fully dissolve so you don't see any particles in the bottom of your jar. Once that's dissolved, I'm going to add this to my pot. I have yet to add water to this pot so that it's easier to maneuver. Pour that in there. And now I'm going to take one of these strips of detergent and stick it in here. Pour a little bit of water over top. Stir this in. Now I'm gonna go ahead and pour all of this into my pot. Okay, now I'm gonna slosh around my detergent and soda ash, make sure they're nice and combined. And then I'm going to fill this up with water, leaving enough room for the fabric to fit. It's going to disperse some of the water. Your next step is to pre-soak your fabric. So I am just putting this in the sink and then running water over it to try to get all the fibers to absorb water so that when I put it in the scour bath, it's already pre-wet and will start to absorb the detergents and the water in the pot. Now I'm adding the fiber into the pot so that it can start to soak in there. And I have quite a lot of fabric for the size of my pot. This is a very large pot, but I'm going to just work at it and move it around as much as possible as I heat it. Now I'm going to transfer my water pot with the fiber in it to the stove. And be careful when you do this because your pots are going to be very heavy. And then as you heat it, it's going to get very warm. The thing about scouring fabric is that once you have it in your pot and it starts to heat up and the water eventually boils, those boil bubbles are going to push the fabric up to the surface, and that will cause the pot to start to overflow. And you'll end up with a huge mess on your stove if you're not watching it. So don't walk away and expect this to be okay on its own for the next hour. You do want to check on it, and I highly suggest staying in your kitchen or wherever you're heating to keep an eye on it. I left my pot simmering thinking, oh, it'll be okay, I can go do something else and work on my next step in the dyeing process while my fabric scours, and I came back and there was water running off of the stove and onto the top of my stove. So safety hazard, not great for your flooring, and overall just not a great idea to leave hot pots by themselves. What we're aiming for is bringing this to a boil and holding it at a simmer to a boil for 1 to 2 hours, and you'll be able to start to see the water turn kind of a yellowish color, sometimes even brown if your fabric is really dirty. Watch the water color to see whether we need a second rinse or a second batch of scouring, but this is going to sit here for the next 1 to 2 hours, and I'll keep you posted on how it goes. I want to invite you to join the Textile Indie clan by joining my email update list. You can find the sign up link in the description below. If you add your name and email address to that, you'll get a twice a month email with updates, information, resources in basketry, natural dyeing, spinning, and other fiber crafts. Be sure to go into your email and click confirm or verify your email, because you will get a confirmation email asking you, do you really want these emails? Click yes, and then you'll get onto that list, all the goodies from textileindy.com. Hit the like button and subscribe if you found this helpful. I so appreciate you being here and walking the creative journey with me. Thanks for joining me today. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.